What nonsense did you believe for way too long before you found out it was made up? My mom told me that a friend saw a ghost on her computer because she was on it after 11 p.m. Took me until college started to realize she just didn't want us playing computer games till that late. I once asked my older cousin what BDSM meant and she said be just a Sailor Moon, Portuguese for kisses from Sailor Moon. So 10-year-old me started using BDSM as my online signature. Wow, you just reminded me. Someone called me fellatio at school one day and not knowing what it meant I just thought they were being funny and made up a word. Later I was playing a video game and put fellatio as my character name. My dad noticed and was noticeably upset. Props to him. He didn't get mad, just asked me why I'd written that. Then poor guy had to explain to me what it really meant. Medieval times never happened. Nobody told me that they didn't. I just thought that since dragons were fictional so was everything else. 4th grade blew my mind. Until I was in 5th grade I thought you could get pregnant from French kissing. It was very traumatic when a boy French kissed me at the roller rink and I had to go home and tell my mom, I think I'm pregnant. LOL. Probably pretty traumatic for your mom too. My mum used to say that slugs could swim. I picked up a bucket, filled it with water and went around dropping slugs into their watery grave. After I collected as many as I could I sat there, staring at them, waiting for them to swim around. No bueno. When I found out that they were dead I cried my eyes out. How could you let me do this? I'm a murderer. A slug murderer. That's a great way to get your kid to pick slugs out of your garden though. When I was younger my dad told me that horses were called cows and that cows are called horses. I went by this terminology until 3rd grade where I got into a heated argument with one of my teachers which led to my first and only school suspension. Thanks Dad. He probably laughed his butt off when he heard the reason. I was told when I was a child that blood wasn't replenishable, so anytime I got a cut or slice I would band-aid up for days. Thinking about how I'm probably still about 98% full of blood and how long I can make it last. I can't imagine what you would think if you saw a blood drive. I thought the wedding kiss was what got the woman pregnant. Like, not just any kiss but only the one where the minister says you may now kiss the bride. I didn't think about the fact that people have multiple children, multiple years apart. I believed this as well. I also though you had to get married multiple times if you wanted more than one kid too. I thought President Andrew Jackson was black because his last name was Jackson and everyone with the same last name must be related. So surely he was black because the Jackson 5 were all black. I learned differently in about 4th grade when the teacher couldn't stop laughing when I explained why the picture of Andrew Jackson was wrong in our book. I mean, I hope you can see the humor in that now, because that is hilarious. As a kid watching Shrek, seeing Puss in Boots get in trouble for having catnip on him I always just assumed cat owners had to go to some pet black market to get a hold of the crap. I didn't find out catnip was not an illegal substance until I was 23 years old. Somewhat related, I thought the black market was a physical place where people went to buy illegal things, sort of like Nocturne Alley in Harry Potter. I always wondered why the police didn't just raid the black market and shut it down if it was so bad. When I was a kid, one of my friends told me that black people pooped white since white people pooped brown. It didn't help either that all my black friends went along with it. Being black, I actually believed that all black people had brown poop and all white people had white poop. It only made sense, since of course, chocolate milk comes from brown cows. We had pet rabbits in our backyard when I was about 6-7 and it was mine and my younger sister's, 5-6, job to help with the rabbits. We would even spend HRS picking clovers for them and carefully taking them out one at a time to let them hop around the yard. But our rabbits kept escaping at night when we were asleep, one at a time, never to be seen again. My sister and I were mystified. We had trouble with the locks. How did the rabbits possibly escape? Before winter, a whole lot of them escaped and according to my mom, the dog spooked them and we never see them again. Cut to my being 16, on the phone with you get sister and he get on the subject of our beloved shared rabbit, Marbling. Hey Ma, whatever happened to Marbleen? Did she take part in the Great Rabbit Escape? She made great stew. We ate my pet rabbit. We ate all the rabbits. They escaped. Yup, right into our freezer. Cheaper than chicken. Sister and I were traumatized. As a kid I cried the first time my dad shot and cooked a rabbit for us to eat. I just knew it was Thumper from Bambi. That cockroaches could survive a nuclear war. I thought it meant any one roach was nuclear resistant. They're way more scary that way. Now they're just slightly more resistant to radiation and are hard to squish, so they could probably survive a building collapsing. Any cockroaches in the blast zone will burn, vaporize just like everything else. My dad told my sister that the bumps in the road, lane dividers, are road braille for blind people who drive. She believed well into adulthood. My dad used to tell me that the concrete barriers dividing roads were dinosaur stoppers. When my brothers or I disagreed, he always stated, "Well, you don't see any dinosaurs, do you?" When I was 3 or 4, my cousin told me cotton candy was made out of spider webs. I'm in my 30s now. I know it's not spider webs, but I still can't bring myself to eat it. That speed bumps were actually the resting place of the deceased, and basically they'd lay some bodies down, pave over them, and you had a speed bump. I was a naive kid, and my uncle was a jerk. Actually, in Puerto Rico we call the speed bumps muertos, dead people. When I was a kid, our parents were desperate to get us to eat kidney beans, so they told us they were actually Santa Claus beans because Santa Claus and his elves ate them at the North Pole. I forgot the story behind it and just believed they were nicknamed Santa Claus beans. Figured it out when I asked for Santa Claus beans in my burrito bowl at Chipotle. When I was a kid, my mom had this old car with a turn knob dial for the radio. She told me it only got oldies radio stations because it was so old. When they gave that car to my brother, he immediately ripped the radio out and put in a new sound system. I always assumed he just wanted the new radio stations. Then I was in college riding in a friend's old beta car and we were listening to a top 40 type radio station and I was like, holy crap, how is your car able to get modern radio stations? Oh my lord, I love this. As though the radio signals from the past are still hanging up there in the sky and your car's tech determines which temporal echoes you can snag, as if with a butterfly net. I, born 1982, believe that my Game Boy needs to rest after playing on it, since it gets tired just like a person. Clever parenting, in hindsight. That's kind of adorable. I grew up in a tea drinking family. I would often drink tea, with lots of sugar, and I would often leave the teaspoon in the cup while I drank. People would say, watch out, you'll go blind from that, and I would be like, nah man, ain't no one I ever heard of gone blind from drinking too much tea. When I turned 18-19 it dawned on me, they meant that the teaspoon would someday poke me in the eye. Well, unless you had 2 spoons you'd just be a pirate, not blind. That whole idea that daddy long legs insects are ridiculously poisonous, but they just can't bite you because their mouths are too small. Is that not true? Every extra time you press the button at the lights to cross the road it resets a timer and you have to wait longer to cross. I once had a job counting traffic, and pedestrians would walk by me asking what I was doing. I would explain to them that the crosswalk buttons are actual fragile and that the municipality has spent $XXX fixing them because of people pressing them too many times. I think I fooled a lot of people and there's probably rumors going around their family and friends now. My older cousin told me that U-Haul trucks were always full of whatever the picture on the side of the truck was. This made sense to me. Coke trucks were full of Coke. Walmart trucks were full of Walmart stuff. So why wouldn't the truck with a submarine on the side be full of submarines? I was 8 or 9 when I asked my mom how they got dinosaurs into a truck if they were all extinct. I think she actually took my temperature after that question. Haha, Walmart stuff. So when I was little, probably 3 or 4, I was eating grapes one day and my grandmother told me very seriously that if I eat too many grapes, they'd go down and end up in my bowel sac. Later that day while taking bath I remember I felt my bowel sac and crying out loud as I assumed it was the grapes I ate. Yep, it took a while for my mom to convince me that they were already there. That's fricked up. Grandma. That I was adopted. The story went that they found me in a basket in the river. I knew that was BS because it matches the Moses story too much. I just assumed I had been kidnapped. Wasn't till I was about 10 that I realized it was all made up and I was actually my parents' biological kid. The joke in my family is that I'd been found under a cabbage leaf, but it was clearly a joke. I cannot believe your parents let it get so far as to make you believe you had been kidnapped. I thought smoking a bowl involved putting your weed in a cereal bowl or something, lighting it on fire, and then inhaling the smoke that way like in some kind of ancient Native American ceremony. I heard someone say this once back in middle school and it made sense to my naive, 12-year-old mind. Up until I was 18 I thought that when a man had a vasectomy that his testicles were removed completely, and I always thought to myself there must be a better way. Bonsai cats. I found a website when I was in college that advertised cats put into glass jars and left there to grow into the shape of the jar, with a hole for waste and a hole for their mouths in the special jars. I was horrified and showed some friends who were also horrified. Months later a friend of mine was like, "Wow, you really got us with that website, sappy, hahaha, I thought it was real." "Oh, yeah, haha, of course it is not real and I was enacting fun japery," said I. Ha, I'm an idiot. One person told me that if I ever eat oysters I would have to chew on them otherwise they would stay alive and grab my esophagus. Another person told me that if I did, it would release gastric liquid into my mouth and dissolve my tongue. I don't eat oysters. When I was in middle school my dad convinced me to raise my legs when crossing over train tracks for good luck on your next date. Eventually decided it was BS when I didn't score any dates. You have to get a date first, then go to train tracks and cross them by raising your feet properly. That gives you the good luck to not trip and die. Don't use paper bags. Use plastic. Save a tree in the rainforest. My school taught that nonsense for Earth Day. Then I have learned of tree farms. Then we learned paper decomposes far faster. Then we learned plastic is far worse in every way. Yet plastic bags are still in the majority. My parents told me that the little IR receptor, little glass bubble, on the living room TV was a tiny camera and that it would record me and my sister when they weren't home and they would watch the tape to make sure we didn't lie to them about what we did. This was a throwaway line my mom said once to get my sister to confess to something they knew she did. She was 5 and I was 7, and I believed that crap until I was 18. I knew how televisions worked and I knew how remote controls worked, but for some reason I never put 2 and 2 together until I was getting ready to move out for college and I asked my parents, "Hey, where did you get that old TV that had a camera in it? Can I have that for my dorm to make sure my roommate doesn't mess with my stuff?" I'm still feeling the residual embarrassment of that a decade and a half later. That there's chemicals added to pools that will indicate when someone has peed by showing a red ring around them. It never prevented me from peeing in the pool, but I'd always swim away from where I peed hoping to outswim that red ring. When it never appeared, I just assumed the pools I swam in didn't have the red ring chemical, but then found out it's just a bull story parents tell kids to keep them from peeing in the pool, which didn't even work with stubborn, nasty me anyway. Full stop. That a raise promotion was on its way and all I had to do was be patient along with thinking of more ways to help out some more. My supervisors led me to believe that the raise promotion was coming for nearly 6 months, but towards the end of that time I got tired of waiting and decided to quit. There were many reasons as to why I left that job, but being underpaid and overworked was one of the main reasons I quit. It wasn't until 6 months after I left that job that a former co-worker told me that it was all made up and our supervisor was just trying to get everyone to do more work so it'd look as if he were a good leader supervisor. It still pisses me off to this day, but at this point there's nothing I can do about it. My entire company for 3 years. You've contributed far more than a senior person could have, even though you're entry level. Just keep doing things and we'll promote you. I used to think the presidential race was a physical race, and I never understood why each party always chose old guys to run it. When I was a little girl, my dad always told me that the artificial Christmas tree he just put up needed 24 hours for the branches to settle before we could decorate it. Me, being the naive little kid that I was, believed this and excitedly waited for the next evening to arrive so we could hang all the decorations on it. Year after year after year. Fast forward to me being 20, moving out into my first apartment, with a friend of mine as a roommate. Our first Christmas in the apartment comes, and I set up my newly acquired artificial tree. My roommate goes to grab all the decorations and I tell her no, we have to let the branches settle tonight, we can decorate it tomorrow. Cue her laughter as she explains to me that the branches only need to settle on real trees. Internally I think, no, that can't be right. My dad told me this and he wouldn't let me astray. But also, maybe she's onto something. I mean, the branches are all bendy and crap. I proceed to question my dad about this while I'm at a family dinner a short time after, only to have the whole family respond with laughter. Full belly laughs at my youthful naivety and gullibility. My dad sheepishly proceeds to tell me that my roommate is indeed correct, and he had just told me that because he was always so tired of placing branches and stringing the lights when he'd put the tree up. That telling me this was just his way of delaying part 2 of the great Christmas tree decorating festivities. He was rightfully floored and amused that I had believed him and still did at the wise old age of 20. I'm 37 now. Still haven't lived this one down. My dad used to hock lodgies out the car window all the time and he didn't want me to spit all the time, so he always said he was spitting ice cubes out the window. It took me until I was like 15 to think, where the frick is he getting an ice cube from? That you can't drive at night with the reading light on in your car. Man, my parents made it seem like the end of the goddamn world if we turned on the light. I assumed it was like a spotlight of death to the driver. Then I started driving and, yeah, not a big deal. As long as the backseat passenger says, hey, I'm gonna turn the light on to look for something, I'm good. Up until I was 10, though blood was something from the ground. So if you fall over and scrape yourself, the blood was coming from the ground onto your skin. That's a disturbing thought. When characters in movies and TV shows were killed, they actually used prisoners on death row and actually killed them. I believe that I fit in with the cool kids. It took me way too long to realize that I was embarrassing myself with them for trying to fit in. You're a cool kid to me. As a kid, I used to love sticking my hand out of the car window and play with the wind. One day my older sister and I were headed down the highway to go visit our parents. I guess I was driving her bananas. She told me it was illegal to have your hand outside of a moving car. I believed that until I got out of high school. I'm a dope. Then one day about 3 years ago, I was driving my niece somewhere and she kept sticking her arm out of the window, getting in the way of the side mirror. I spread the knowledge that day. I wonder if it'll take her as long as it took me to realize the truth. Rather than find out something is fake, I found out something is real. I found out recently that Joan of Arc was a real person. I always assumed she was a fictional character from a book or something. My mom was 45 when I finally proved to her that pirates were actually a real thing. My friend and I found several legit looking videos on YouTube years ago that showed evidence of mermaids being real. I spent an entire week passionately defending the existence of mermaids to my whole family and people I work with. I thought you were about 12 when you found that video, and that's cute. And people I work with. Oh. Santa Claus. I always thought he was suspect, because he'd buy me the off-brand of whatever toy I wanted that year, so I wasn't that big of a fan, but was quite surprised to realize it was my parents. You can't eat salty foods and sweet foods at the same time or it will cause indigestion. This was a lie. My mother's grandma told my mom to get her to stop drinking sweetened milk with dinner, and my mom passed it on to me for no reason at all. My family also believes in traditional Chinese medicine ideas, so I just figured it was one of those things and never questioned this one specifically. I didn't learn it was completely made up until my mom accidentally told me. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.